going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And don't worry, it was totally out on Thursday this week. Not a question at all. But honestly, if you didn't see this video when it came out and you were looking for it, you should probably make sure that that bell is rung down below. Because that bell will make sure, and you should subscribe as well if you haven't done that yet, but you should subscribe and ring the bell. The bell will make sure that you get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, including more JaARs. So anyway, this week we are here with another, or the continuation of our Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch story reviews. This is story number 14, Home Waters by Kelly Diggs. And so you may be thinking to yourself, if you've been following along with this, because I sure was thinking about it, that the last story that Kelly Diggs did for this series, specifically the last story about water or related to water, was a Kiora story. And this one is no different, as you probably saw from the thumbnail for this video. This is also a Kiora story, and it is 13 stories since the last one, and also written by Kelly Diggs. So I appreciated that they were able to keep that through line. You know, Amy, you've been kind of talking about it a lot in these videos of keeping the authors with what they know. Yeah. Right? And so,
or at least what they're good at, what you have determined they're good at.
Right. And so Kelly Diggs doing both of these Kiora stories is nice. My quick review at the top is I enjoyed this one. I think that a lot of these stories, right, this is story number 14, and we haven't gotten to the battle for Zendikar yet. There's have been some fights here and they're kind of interspersed throughout, but you can tell it's all building towards an Ulamog confrontation of some sort. And so this one is a good building story to get Kiora into the fray, but I still really enjoyed it. I don't know what you thought as well.
Yeah, it was really good. I liked it a lot. Yeah, good writing, interesting plot.
Yeah.
I feel like it had a lot of variety to it.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff for us to get into in this as well, so we will do that. But the reason that we give you the quick review at the top is if it's something that you're interested in going and reading for yourself before listening to our review, because one of the things that we do say, I mean, it's an older story, so we're going to give some background, but not full and in-depth, because as we usually say here, we review, we don't summarize. And so if you're looking for being able to read the story for yourself and not have it spoiled, top link down in the description box below will send you to this story. We removed any and all barriers that we could, and so go read this story for yourself if that's something that you're interested in, if you have the time. I would say this was of average length. I don't think it was too short or too long. So if you have the time, I suggest doing that. And then, of course, we would love it if you would come back here and join us for our review afterwards. But either way, on to the full review itself. There's the little intro in the beginning reminding us where we last saw Kiora, and kind of reminding you, hey, by the way, she's going to have a bident, and it's not weird. She stole it from a god, so, you know, go read that last story or whatever. But she has Thassa's bident, which kind of quickly turns into coral, right? Like it was this like beautiful Nykthos-y bident, or Nyx bident, where it was all Starfield-y. Yeah. And then it turns into coral because, hey, guess what? It's not on Theros anymore, so that's not a thing. So there's that moment for Kiora of like, yeah, I got this bident. Oh, well, I hope it still has some power left in it besides just being a spear thing.
Maybe you should steal shit from other worlds. That's what you get. That's like, you know, you steal something in D&D and it just like has an enchantment on it where it's like, because you stole it, now it's worthless.
It's a curse, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Or it's like endlessly trapped, so you like can't use it.
Yeah. Or you can never put it down. There's a lot of interesting curses in D&D. Super fun. It kind of starts with something that I really enjoyed, which was I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a big fan of fables, right? Like stories of like animals and whatever. But I really liked this one, and I'm aware of the real world comparisons that can be drawn. And I really liked the one that Kelly did here, or that, Kiora is telling here, of Cozy and Ula and Emiria. And we're going to talk about them a lot in this one. For people who are unaware, that is, Cozy, Ula, and Emiria are a trio of gods worshipped by the merfolk. Some worship just one, some worship just the other. And as we will learn, none worship Cozy. None worship Cozy.
The trickster god.
And so it would be blasphemous to worship Cozy. And like I said, we'll talk about that. But it's a story of the gods. But the gods are actually Ulamog for Ula, Kozilek for Cozy, and Emrakul for Emiria. So without realizing it, the merfolk were just worshipping the Eldrazi.
Yep.
And so, again...
It's the correct thing to do.
just because you love Emrakul.
I don't love her, I worship her.
Well, your Lord and Savior is hiding in a moon right now. I hope that's okay.
Whatever she's gonna do, she's gonna do.
That's fair.
And that makes it okay.
And how dare we question her ways? If you too are joining the Church of Emiria, leave it in the comments for Amy and let her know. But yeah, so the story that we hear is like, it's a story being told to children of Cozy tricking Ula into thinking that Ula's spear is his spear when it's actually a giant feather. And the dolphins laugh at Ula a lot. And Ula gets upset and grabs the spear and starts stabbing at them over and over and trying to kill them. But turns out it's a giant feather. And the dolphins are being tickled by the feather, and so they keep laughing. And so that is a way to indicate, well, the dolphins are laughed at Ula and are still laughing to this day. And so it indicates to you why dolphins make that sound. Yeah. And it's just a way of telling children or gullible adults, I guess,
wow.
Indicating to them why certain things in the world occur, or with fables, like why animals act a certain way or do certain things. And, there are actual like scientific or evolutionary reasons for it, but for the cutesiness of a story, that is why. Because the dolphins are still laughing at how dumb Ula was to think that that big feather was actually a spear. I liked that a lot because I thought that it was, what a cool and creative thing to do. Is like, you know what I want to do? I want to make a fable. But I want to make a fable in whenever this was written, 2015 or whatever, right? Not Aesop's fables from way back in the day or anything like that, the tortoise and the hare, etc. No, I'm going to make a story on the world of Zendikar where the Eldrazi gods that are being worshipped by the merfolk play tricks on each other, or Cozy plays tricks, and the dolphins laugh at them. Brilliant. I thought that was really great, and I loved it.
Yeah.
But just again, I guess that's props to Kelly Diggs for like just being able to come up with that kind of a thing, because it's not something I would really ever think of doing, but I think it's awesome. It worked really, really well. So, talking about the three gods, Cozy, Ula, Emiria, we find out that those types of stories of Cozy being the trickster god, somewhat blasphemous to talk about those stories. And to a degree that makes sense. You and I were kind of talking about this before we started, that that Cozy tricking Ula and or Emiria, but in that story it was Ula, makes Ula seem less legitimate as a god,
I guess,
in the eyes of some of the followers, right? That if you make the gods look foolish, then they are not as revered, because now they can be played for fools. They are, and so that kind of gives them like a more mortal characteristic as opposed to an immortal characteristic. And if you think of your gods as mortals, well, they're not very good gods, because a god is meant to be immortal. A mortal can be killed. A mortal can make mistakes. Gods, depending on who you are as a worshiper, you may want your gods to not be depicted that way because you want to worship an omnipotent figure or whatever. But I don't know that you...
I mean, I was just like, these people can fucking take a joke. Like, the person who's playing the tricks on them is also a god.
Right.
It's not like it's a mortal, you know, and the story is, ha ha ha, all these mortals can play all these tricks on these gods because they're dumb. I don't know. But like, because I could see that causing an issue of having enough respect for the gods that you're worshiping.
Sure.
But I don't see that with a trickster god tricking gods.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. But I think, so it was because of that, and I hear you and I agree with you. I think, like I said, I think it's, you know, for people who want their gods to be revered, I guess anything that makes their god look foolish is a bad idea to them. But I agree with you that, like, who the hell cares? It's a children's story, and if there is a trickster god, why not let the trickster god be tricksy? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
But it kind of goes into that in this story, because Kiora even mentions, like, well, you know, why don't they just stop telling the stories? And it's because, like, these elders that tell these stories to the children, Kiora imagines that when they were younger, they were running around and, like, secretly worshiping Cozy behind their parents' backs as well. And so it, like, is just a generational thing that gets passed down that, like, hey, some people are going to be Ula worshippers, some people are going to be Emiria worshippers, and some people are going to be Cozy worshippers. Shh. And we hear that even more when Kiora gets to that temple, that underwater temple that she finds, and finds that there are the 3 statues, and she remembers that she, as a child, used to go to this temple and leave worship, leave sacrifices or whatever they're called, for the gods on their altars. And they would leave things for, some would leave things for Ula, some would leave things for Emiria, and no one would leave anything for Cozy because it was not okay to worship the trickster god. And then, later on, after they left, Kiora and her sister Turi would come down together and sneak things for Ula, or for Cozy, excuse me, thank you. And she always said every time they got there, the altar was never empty.
Yeah, someone had gotten there before them.
Or many someones.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
something for Cozy already.
Which is awesome. First of all, for this story, it's great foreshadowing. But also, it just lets you know, like, you know, it's not okay to do this. But Kiora kind of gets her own question answered of, like, why do they keep telling the stories then? Because there are a number of people who are secretly worshipping Cozy out there. And the, like, merfolk elders or whatever, some of the elders, don't know about it. Because people are doing it in secret. They are being tricksy about it.
Yeah,
what a surprise.
That's a very typical thing, you know, in terms of history. Just, you know, here's this new imperialist that comes in and fights everybody and then takes over the country and then tells you what your religion has to be. And you just, in your own house, you know, practice your own religion and pretend that you're not.
Right. Which is why, and there is a lot of a discussion that could be had about this that I'm not going to have, but that's why the ideal or the principle of freedom of religion here in the United States was a thing, because no one should ever tell you that you aren't permitted to worship whoever you want to worship, as long as you're not hurting anyone else in the process. And that, again, that becomes a whole other thing, which I'd rather not get into, but I think everyone here knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But But regardless, so yes.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
There's that too. But it all comes together in the way that Kiora says kind of to herself, but that's why she is the way she is. That's why she fought Thassa and stole her Bident. Because Kiora was raised with the stories of Cozy tricking Ula and Emiria and learning that, hey, sometimes gods ain't shit.
Right.
And you don't need to be afraid of them because they can look dumb just like everybody else. And because of that, you're just as good as they are or vice versa. So if that's the case, who cares? And so Kiora grew up not idolizing gods, not fearing gods, but knowing that gods are fine as long as they're doing things to help the people. But if they're not, you don't have to bow down to them. And so when she heard about Thassa and knew that Eryximethys, right, this is relating back to the first story that we did in this playlist, so feel free to go check that out. But when Kiora heard that Eryximethys was a thing, she wanted Eryximethys to come help her fight the Eldrazi. And so she was trying to bind Eryximethys to herself, send Eryximethys through the water, through the Blind Eternities to Zendikar, and then have it there to help her, and instead ended up with a Bident because Thassa was like, hey, that's mine? No, in terms of Eryximethys. And so...
But not about the Biden.
Not about the Biden because she didn't get a chance.
Yeah.
Kiora was just like, oh, you're pinning me to a rock with this? Cool, it's mine now. And planeswalked with it and then heard Thassa yelling and that was the end of it. So, yeah. Which I find interesting that, I don't even know that I talked about this, but interesting that when we went back to Theros, when Theros Beyond Death, you know, the first time we went to Theros, we had the weapons of the gods as equipment or whatever. Not in this set. And I'm curious if they would do that kind of a thing where they would have the weapons of the gods again minus the Bident, or give Thassa a new weapon that she found that, like, maybe isn't as good as the Bident, like, for flavor reasons or something. Anyway, that's way outside of what we're doing here today. But I also, I really liked the line where Kiora is still in the temple, and she, like, spits on the Ula statue, I think, to say, like, you know, screw you, you're not a god. So, and again, just openly defying the gods like that.
Yeah, because she was basically saying Kozilek is the only one who, even though he's a trickster god, he wasn't tricking all of us into believing in him because he was just being honest and himself.
Yeah, I wrote it.
Whereas the other two gods basically had fooled all of us into revering them and then showed up and destroyed the planet.
That's right. Yeah, I think the line I wrote down, because I liked that a lot, that idea of, like, Cozy was the only honest one because he was always presenting himself as a liar.
Right.
So you never had to believe him in that, oh, wait, they weren't gods? Oh, okay, Cozy, I get it. The other two, what the hell? So, yes. And then, sure enough, spitting on the Ula statue, etc., like, at the time that this story was written, we didn't know where Emrakul was, but now that we know that Emrakul is about to be busy over on Innistrad and not here, right, Cozy is hidden, Ulamog is around and messing things up, and so Kiora knows that Ulamog is her quarry at this point. And with the Bident of Thassa, she's like, this is gonna happen. And so she ends up saving a group of merfolk, which happens to include her sister. And she meets up with Yanai, is one of the older members of that group. And she I thought it was interesting, because we heard that Kiora was, as a child, a worshiper of Cozy with her sister. And yet, as she got older, she kind of keeps saying, like, well, I don't really worship anybody at this point, right? There's no reason to. We know that they are frauds, that they are Eldrazi instead. And yet, when Yanai steps up and starts talking about the gods, Kiora throws a cozy story in his face.
Yeah.
And he gets all, clutches his pearls. It's like, oh my god, you're telling a cozy story. Blasphemous. Well, sure, but also. And so, Yanai...
Also, dude, you've been lied to.
Yeah, and you need to figure it out right quick, because look around you, maybe. But I just find it interesting that, then Kiora, after telling this cozy story, even though she says she's not a Kozilek worshiper, or cozy worshiper, she tells this story, asks if any of them will come with her. Yanai says, no, we're not coming with you, to go back to Seagate. Ulamog's there, or headed there. And Kiora's like, well, great, I gotta beat him there, pulls out a sea serpent, or calls up a sea serpent to try to, beat Ulamog to Seagate so that she can help in the fight. And Yanai's like, yeah, no, the rest of us are getting the hell out of here. That included Kiora's...
Wait, Yanai is like, yeah, no?
Nice.
Okay.
I guess so. Including Kiora's sister going with that group. And yet, when Kiora says, will any of you come with us? And Yanai says, yeah, no. There are a group of merfolk that come and join her. Because she finds out they are the cozy worshippers. And because she told that story, it said, hey, by the way, I'm one of you, if there are any of you out there. And Yanai, again, clutching his pearls, and yet now notices that all these other people who were with him, he was tricked. And so, they were hidden. And so now Kiora gets a group of merfolk to go with her. And so it's the Kozilek worshippers that get to go fight Ulamog, I guess. Again, it's that whole idea of the ones that revere the gods and are afraid of them are attempting futilely to run away from the gods. And the ones who think they're not shit are now going to go face Ulamog because, hey, guess what? We can.
Right.
There's a group of people that are fighting them. And while the core don't believe in Cozy, Ula, and Emiria, they believe in these are big, scary Eldrazi and we got to fight and kill them.
Right.
Right? It's the same idea. So that's kind of how the story ends, is Kiora and the other cozy worshippers head into Seagate. And so, again, like I said, it's kind of a setup story of this is how Kiora gets into the fight. And how she has an army with her to do that, is because they are other people who are willing to defy the gods, the merfolk gods of Theros, aka the Eldrazi.
Right.
And everybody else is just running away. And the ironic thing is, if Kiora and everybody else at Seagate, but if Kiora and her merfolk succeed, the people that ran may feel like it was the right thing to have done. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, they'll be safe. But the only reason they'll be safe is because the Eldrazi were defeated.
Right.
By this battling army that is gathering at Seagate. And so all the people that are cowardly and ran away, sure, they'll be safe too, but not because of what they did, right? They just delayed the inevitable, and then somebody came in over there and saved them. It's just,
That God-fearing people couldn't fight because they were afraid.
Yep.
Because they had respect for the gods that the others didn't have.
Yep, and that they didn't deserve to have respect for, basically.
Right. But...
Yeah.
Which they knew.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
But when it's what you believe and it's ingrained enough.
Yeah, that deeply rooted, yeah.
That might not have as much, that new information might not have as much of an effect as you might think.
It's true. Yeah. I don't really have, much else to say on this.
Just like Hanam and Ken.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that was a parallel that I could see, because it's interesting, right? Gideon's relationship with the Theros gods, at the time that this story was written, was fleshed out, because we already knew that he was born Kytheon on Theros. We already knew that Erebos killed his friends when they were defiant to a god, and that he was, cocky until he wasn't. But his interactions with Oketra and any other gods, Hazoret, etc., on Amonkhet have not happened yet and won't happen for a while at the time that this story was written. So another planeswalker kind of having that type of a strained relationship with gods.
Yeah.
Whether it's Theros to Zendikar gods or Theros to Amonkhet gods. It was something I thought of an interesting dichotomy as well. So, okay. Anything else on this one?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Not a problem at all. I again, good one. Interesting. Sets us up for wherever we're going to be next week, because we'll be back next week with story number 15, whatever that happens to be. We're hopefully ramping up, it seems. I mean, I remember broad strokes of what this story looks like, and I'm looking forward to the cool character moments that I know are coming up in like the big meeting that they have for discussing how to beat the Eldrazi. That's a really good one from what I remember. When we meet Noy and Dar, that's a really good one as well, so I'm looking forward to that too. So yeah.
Well, I remembered the Drana one to be better than it actually turned out to be.
Okay, and that's why we're doing this, right? It should be interesting to see what our memories are versus what it is now, and what we knew then versus what we know now in terms of writing potential as well as just story in general. Like, does it hold up? And that's part of why we're doing this, but also because these stories exist and we haven't reviewed them yet and we want to. So here we are doing just that. So
yeah, I mean, we definitely got spoiled when the stories got incredible, and unfortunately that's something we can compare the other stories to.
Yeah.
Because any stories going forward are never going to be as good. And even when we go back and read older stories going, well, it was written by the same people, so it's going to be as good. Sometimes they're not. Because it took them a bit to get to a point where they were that good.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and hopefully they will be again. That's kind of the idea. We shall see. I think they're trending in the right direction these days. I can't lie, right? I thought that Kaldheim was cool. I enjoyed Kaldheim stories.
Yeah.
I thought Zendikar Rising was fine as well, and that's the newest versions of the stories that we're getting. I'm aware that in the background, the actual response from the fans is crickets, because not many people are reading the stories anymore because they messed them up so badly. But I'm hoping that there are still people out there.
There were lots of loose ends that they never tied up.
Or that they messed up and, it was not satisfying for anyone. So
I'm even talking about the Kaldheim stories.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I'm not even talking about the precursor to that. I'm talking about the trajectory that they're moving now, which is positive, but still not quite where you would expect it to be.
Sure. And so, fingers crossed, obviously we will be back next week with more of this, and then whenever we find out information on Strixhaven stories, we will be here for those as well. If we get to those before we get to the end of this, we will obviously take a break like we did with Kaldheim, and then come back to these. Otherwise, we'll get to the end of these, and then take a break until Strixhaven. It depends on how it works. I assume Strixhaven will happen first, because I think there are 31 of these, and we're only 14 in, so we've got some time. But that is going to be the end of this particular episode. Thank you so very much for watching. Please don't forget to check out our other channels down in the description box below. Like I said, the top link is to the video, to the story, but there are other links as well. You should check those out. Subscribing, ringing the bell, etc. Super helpful. Check out our other videos on this channel, those channels, all that good stuff. We are live every Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on this channel. Mondays we stream MTG Arena, drafts, and etc. Almost always limited. Occasionally I do very crappy, janky standard, but that's very occasional. And on Fridays we do video games. This Friday we will be continuing Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi, which I started last week, and oh boy was that a hell of a thing. If you missed the VOD of that one, the VODs go up on Video Games for All. Check the description below. So you can see how far we got in that game, and we'll continue it this Friday here on this channel. But super importantly, stay tuned next week as we continue on with this, because reading these stories, thinking about the authors, thinking about the characters, reminiscing about what it was like then, looking forward to what we get to see in the future now, all great ways to join us in showing off your...
Hashtag Worthos Pride.
Did you think I'd forget? I wasn't going to forget.
No.
Good. I was more asking them, but I appreciate it nonetheless. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear from you. What did you think of this story? What did you think of our analysis? Any and all thoughts that you might have.
Any thoughts you have on this story, I want to hear them.
That's what it's for. We would love to continue the conversation. So, for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.